The moment my brother's truck disappeared around the corner of the street, my nephew walked up to me, tugged on my sleeve, and said the clearest, most terrifying sentence I'd ever heard from a 7-year-old. "Auntie, don't sign anything. Dad left papers on the table for you. He said they were for the house, but I heard him say they weren't." I looked down at him. Theo, big brown eyes, hair still messy from the drive. My brother had told me he barely spoke anymore, something developmental, something the school had flagged, something the doctors were still figuring out. He'd been almost completely non-verbal for 2 years. Communication cards. A little whiteboard he carried in his backpack. Appointments every other Tuesday in Sudbury. And he was standing in my brother's kitchen, looking straight at me, talking in a perfectly clear voice like he'd been doing it his whole life. My stomach dropped. Let me go back, because to understand what happened that afternoon in October, you need to understand how I ended up standing in my brother's house in the first place, and why I had absolutely no reason to see any of it coming. My name is Kate. I'm 31 years old. I work as a paralegal at a mid-sized firm in Ottawa. I grew up in northern Ontario, just outside of Sudbury, in one of those towns where everyone waves at each other from their trucks and nobody locks their doors. My parents were practical people. Dad worked the mines for 30 years. Mum kept the books for 3 different local businesses out of a corner office in our basement. They weren't wealthy, but they were careful. And everything they had, they built themselves. My brother is 4 years older than me. When we were kids, he was the one with the easy smile, the one who could talk his way into anything. Teachers loved him. Neighbors gave him summer jobs without him even asking. My parents trusted him completely, the way you trust something that has never once given you a reason not to. I did too. That's the part that still catches in my throat. Our parents died within 18 months of each other. Dad went first, heart failure, sudden, no real warning. Mum made it 2 more winters before the grief and the diabetes together just took over. By the time we buried her, I'd spent 4 months sleeping on a cot in her living room, managing her medications, driving her to appointments, watching her get smaller. My brother sent money when he could. He had his own life, his partner, the house they'd bought outside Barrie, little Theo who had just turned 5. I didn't resent him for it. I told myself that. I really did. Mum left behind what you'd expect from 2 people who spend their whole lives not wasting anything. The house in Lively paid off, a RSP account worth about $240,000, a small life insurance policy. She split everything down the middle in her will, half to me, half to my brother, with one condition. The family house couldn't be sold without both of our signatures. She was careful that way. She'd seen enough in her years doing books for other people's businesses to know that money did strange things to families. I sometimes wonder if she knew something I didn't. After she died, I went back to Ottawa. I was 30, recently out of a long relationship, renting a 1-bedroom near Glebe that cost more than it should have. My brother suggested I move into the family home. "Keep it in the family," he said. "You could use the stability," he said. It made sense at the time. So I did. I moved back to Lively, took a remote position at my firm, started spending weekends painting the trim and fixing the gutters and learning, slowly, what it meant to keep a house alive. My brother visited twice that first year. The second time, he brought Theo. Theo was quiet. That was the first thing I noticed. The careful kind of quiet, the kind that watches. He'd follow me around the yard while I worked, handing me tools I didn't ask for, pointing at things he thought I should notice. A bird's nest under the eave, a crack in the driveway I hadn't spotted. He didn't use many words, but he wasn't absent. He was the most present child I'd ever been around, honestly. His dad told the schools had raised concerns about his speech development. There'd been some testing. The results were inconclusive at first, and then a specialist in Sudbury mentioned something about a language processing delay, possibly connected to anxiety. Possible selective mutism, she said. They were still working through it. I wasn't around much for the details. I accepted what I was told, because he was my brother. You don't interrogate your brother about his son's medical history. That October, he called me on a Wednesday evening. His voice was warm the way it used to be when we were teenagers, and he wanted to borrow something. He and his partner were heading out of town. A long weekend at a friend's place near Muskoka, already booked, already paid. Their usual sitter had cancelled last minute. Could I take Theo for 4 days? Of course, I said. He's always welcome here. They arrived Friday afternoon. His partner barely got out of the car, just waved from the window, said something about being behind schedule. My brother carried Theo's bag to the door. He seemed distracted, kept checking his phone. He'd printed out a list of Theo's routines, Theo's foods, Theo's communication strategies, and he pressed it into my hand like a checklist before an audit. Before he left, he walked me to the kitchen table. There was a folder sitting there. He said it was paperwork related to the house. Something about refinancing the estate to simplify the co-ownership before end of year. He wanted me to review it and sign before he got back. His lawyer had prepared it. Nothing complicated, he said. Just housekeeping. I said I'd look at it. He hugged me, which was unusual. We weren't really a hugging family. Then he went back to the car, reversed out of the driveway a little too quickly, and was gone. I stood in the kitchen holding the folder, half reading the first page, and then I heard small footsteps behind me. I turned around. Theo was standing in the doorway of the kitchen with his whiteboard in his hands, but he wasn't writing on it. He was looking at me the way someone looks at you when they've been waiting a long time to say something important. Auntie, don't sign anything. Dad left papers on the table for you. He said they were for the house, but I heard him say they weren't. I put the folder down on the counter, slowly, like it was something that might bite me. I knelt down. Theo, my voice came out quieter than I intended. You can talk? He nodded. Just once, like it was the simplest thing in the world. I could always talk, he said. I just stopped. The room felt like it shifted 2 inches to the left. What do you say to a 7-year-old who just handed you something that size? I sat down on the kitchen floor, right there on the linoleum, and I asked him to tell me everything. He did. Theo wasn't born with a language processing delay. There was no inconclusive testing, no specialist in Sudbury. There was a lie, a careful, practiced lie, built around a little boy who one afternoon heard something he wasn't supposed to hear. He was 5. He'd been drawing at the kitchen table in their house in Barrie while his dad was on the phone in the hallway. He wasn't hiding. He was just small enough to be invisible. He heard his dad say my name. He heard him say, "She'll never question me. We get the house, we clear the RRSP, and by the time she figures it out, the statute of limitations has already started running." Theo didn't know what a statute of limitations was. But he knew my name, and he knew the way his dad said it. Flat, businesslike, the way you talk about something that doesn't belong to you yet. He asked about it at dinner that night. Just a simple question. What does statute of limitations mean? The table went quiet. His dad took him upstairs after dinner, sat with him for a long time, and the version Theo gave me, slowly in pieces, was this. His dad told him that I was fragile, that I didn't handle stress well, that if Theo ever talked about things he'd heard or seen around the house, it would upset me badly, maybe badly enough that I wouldn't be okay. He told Theo that the kindest thing he could do for his auntie was to stay quiet, that silence was how you protected people you loved. Theo loved me. I used to drive up and take him to the park near the splash pad on McLeod. I brought him chapter books and sat on the floor with him and read out loud while he turned the pages. He decided that was how you protected me. So he stopped talking. 2 years. I was sitting on the kitchen floor of my parents' house, listening to my 7-year-old nephew describe the decision he'd made to go silent. And I couldn't breathe right, couldn't quite put together a sentence, couldn't do anything except hold his hand and try not to fall apart in front of him. You saved yourself a lot of trouble, I finally said, going quiet like that. He shook his head, very serious. I didn't do it to save trouble. I did it to save you. I looked over at the folder on the counter. Then I looked back at Theo. I asked him, gently, what else he knew. It turned out that being quiet made him disappear. Adults talked around him like furniture. He collected things. He'd seen his dad practice my signature on pages he later burned in the backyard fire pit. He'd heard phone calls about the RRSP and how to move money in increments that wouldn't trigger a call from the financial institution. He'd watched his dad take photos of documents in the estate folder when I wasn't in the room during Mum's last weeks. And 3 weeks before this weekend, he'd heard a conversation between his parents about a notary in Hamilton, someone who did paperwork on short timelines and didn't ask detailed questions. The folder on the counter, he told me, wasn't from a lawyer. His dad had typed it himself. I'm a paralegal. I've spent 8 years reading legal documents for other people. I opened the folder and I knew within 60 seconds. The formatting was almost right. The language was almost right. But the estate file number was wrong. A digit transposed. The notary stamp was photocopied. I could see the smear at the edge, and the signature block at the bottom had my full legal name slightly misspelled. One letter off. The kind of error a lawyer who drafted documents for your family wouldn't make, but a person working from memory might. He wasn't even trying to deceive a professional. He thought he was deceiving a grieving sister who trusted him. My hands were completely steady. That surprised me. I called my colleague, the one I'd worked beside for 6 years, the one who responded to crisis the way some people respond to coffee, with immediate focus and zero drama. She picked up on the second ring. I told her everything. The folder, the forged notary stamp, the RRSP, Theo, all of it. When I finished, there was a pause. Forward me photos of every page in that folder, she said. Right now. Then don't touch it again. She had a contact at the Law Society. She also knew an investigator who specialized in estate fraud. She'd referred clients to him twice. By the time I'd sent the photos, she was already making calls. While I waited, I sat back down on the floor with Theo. He'd gotten his book out of his bag, a field guide to Canadian birds, which was apparently his current obsession. He showed me the pages on boreal chickadees with the seriousness of someone presenting findings to a committee. I let him talk. God, I let him talk. 2 years of silence, and he had so much saved up. Later that evening, my colleague called back. The estate fraud investigator, a methodical, unhurried man who sounded like he had seen everything twice, confirmed what I already suspected. The financial institution managing the RRSP had actually flagged 2 unusual access attempts over the past 11 months. They were still within a review period. Nothing had been transferred yet, but the access pattern was consistent with someone testing the process. The documents in the folder, he said, would constitute fraud. The forged notary stamp alone was a criminal offense under the Criminal Code of Canada. Given the estate was jointly administered and the property was in Ontario, this was likely to involve multiple charges: fraud over $5,000, forgery, potentially uttering a forged document. He asked if I wanted to contact police now or wait until my brother returned. I thought about it. Then I thought about Theo. If my brother came back to find me calm, unsuspecting, folder signed, he'd feel safe. He'd move forward with the Hamilton notary. He'd have evidence of my cooperation. But if he came back to a sister who'd had 4 days to document everything and prepare, he'd have nothing. I called the non-emergency line for the OPP that night and gave a preliminary statement. The officer I spoke with took it seriously from the first sentence. When I mentioned the RRSP access attempts already flagged by the financial institution, she said that corroborated a pattern. She said not to confront him directly. She said to behave normally. I could do that. The next 3 days, I sent my brother exactly the kind of texts he expected. Theo's doing great. We made pancakes. I'm looking at the documents but want to read them properly before I sign. You know me and paperwork. Theo slept in. Cold morning. I've started the pre-winter check on the gutters. Mum would be appalled at the state of the south side. Almost done reading through the folder. I'll have questions when you're back. Each one landed like a hook. Each one made him feel like his careful, trusting, predictable little sister was exactly where he'd put her. Quick, breezy, a thumbs up here. No rush, we can go through it together when I'm back. A photo of the lake at Muskoka, clear skies, no guilt visible anywhere. On day 3, Theo asked if he could call the OPP officer directly. He'd met her briefly when she came by the house in plain clothes to collect the documents. He wanted to tell her about the fire pit, the pages his dad had burned. She drove back out that afternoon. Theo sat at the kitchen table with his field guide nearby. For comfort, I think, and answered every question she asked in that same careful, level voice. He described the phone calls, the signature practice, the photos of the documents during Mum's last weeks. He described the conversation he'd overheard in Barry with the accuracy of a child who had spent 2 years doing nothing but listening. When it was done, he looked at me across the table. "I talked a lot," he said. "You really did. My throat is kind of tired. That's fair. Can we have soup?" We had soup. My brother arrived back Sunday afternoon, pulled into the driveway with the confidence of someone who had already spent the money in his head. His partner waited in the truck. He came to the door with an easy smile, asked how things had gone, ruffled Theo's hair. Theo didn't say anything. Old habit maybe. Or maybe he understood, the way kids sometimes understand things that adults underestimate them for, that it wasn't his moment to speak. My brother walked to the kitchen table, looked at the folder which I'd left exactly where he put it, looked at me. "Did you get a chance to look through it?" "I did," I said. 2 OPP officers came in from the hallway where they'd been waiting. One of them introduced himself. My brother's face went through several expressions very quickly before it landed on something blank and controlled. He asked for a lawyer. They let him. His partner was questioned separately in the driveway. She cooperated immediately. She'd known something was wrong for months, she said. She hadn't understood exactly what, but she knew about the Hamilton notary, knew about the RSP discussions, and she told herself it wasn't her place to interfere in family matters. Her statement was taken. She was not charged. I don't know how I feel about that, honestly, I still don't. The financial institution froze the estate accounts the same day. The RRSP was secured. The estate fraud investigator filed a formal report that went alongside the OPP fee file. It would take months to move through the system. These things always do. But the investigator told me that the paper trail was unusually clear. My brother had been methodical, which is another way of saying he'd created a lot of documentation of his own crimes. Numbers don't lie. He just forgot that I knew how to read them. 3 weeks later, I sat in a lawyer's office in Sudbury, a real one, a family law specialist who'd been recommended by the Law Society, and went through the estate properly. The will was valid. The house was mine and my brother's equally, pending the fraud proceedings. My lawyer advised me on options. Depending on how the charges resolved, there were civil remedies available in addition to the criminal process. I sold my 1-bedroom in Glebe and made the lively house mine properly. I repainted Theo's room the week he came to stay. He'd asked for dark blue, like the night sky when there's no light pollution, auntie, which is actually a lot bluer than most people think. He told me this at length. I listened to all of it. His mother, his dad's partner, the one from the driveway, called me 2 months later. She'd left Barry. She and Theo were renting a place in Chelmsford, 20 minutes away. She asked if I wanted to be in Theo's life still. She sounded like she already knew what I'd say but was asking anyway because she needed to hear it. I said yes. Obviously yes. He comes every other weekend. He's in speech therapy now, not because he can't speak, but because 2 years of selective mutism leaves residue, and his therapist says it's good to have a space where speaking is practiced without pressure. He talks about birds mostly. Northern harriers, which he considers criminally underrated. Sandhill cranes, which he says are ancient in a way that makes humans seem like a new idea. Sometimes he gets quiet again for a little while, and I don't push him. I just sit there, and eventually he starts talking again. Last Saturday, we drove out to Kalani Provincial Park, just the 2 of us. We sat on the rocks above the lake with thermoses of hot chocolate and his field guide open between us, and he told me about everything he'd read that week, which included boreal bird migration patterns, the life cycle of lichen, and a book he'd found about the history of the Canadian Shield that he described, and I quote, extremely long but worth it. I didn't need to say much, I just listened. After a while, he looked out at the water and said quietly, "I'm glad I talked, Aunt, even though it was scary." "Me too," I said. "I wasn't sure you'd believe me." "Of course I believed you." He thought about that. Most people don't really listen to kids. I looked at him, this small, serious, extraordinary brave person sitting on a rock in northern Ontario with hot chocolate and a field guide, and I thought about all the things he'd carried alone for 2 years. All the things he'd watched and heard and stored away, waiting for a moment when speaking felt safer than silence. "I listened to you," I said. He nodded, like that settled something. Then he pointed at a bird on the far shore and said it was a common merganser. And did I know that they nested in tree cavities, which most people didn't realize because they seemed like a water bird, but they were actually quite versatile. And had I seen the documentary? I had not seen the documentary. He told me about it anyway. Some people keep quiet because no one ever made listening feel safe. Theo kept quiet for 2 years because he thought it was the only way to protect someone he loved. And the day he finally decided to speak, really speak, out loud, in a clear voice with his whiteboard still in his hands, was the day he understood that protecting someone sometimes means trusting them with the truth. He found his words again. I found out what family is supposed to feel like. I think we both got the better end of that deal.